And one of the things I fear most is a polarization in society. So people talk a lot about, algorithmic discrimination. So they're worried about AIs and algorithms being discriminatory. What really worries me is AI inequality, where we end up in a society where essentially there's three kinds of people. There's this mass algorithmic underclass of people that are really just working for algorithms. So think of Uber drivers today. You don't work for a human. You work for some lines of code that it's managing your schedule, that's tracking your performance. So whether you're driving a car, you're delivering a box, you're stacking a shelf, you're actually working for an algorithm. So that's not a great place to be because, for lots of reasons, it's highly competitive. There's not a lot of room for growth. There's very little room for learning because your boss is actually not even human. You're not going to get any kind of useful feedback or prospects for advancement. Then you've got a kind of a new professional class that these are the people who have the education, the experience to actually work on and design algorithms and algorithmic systems. So this is kind of the new, like, let's say, upper middle class of professionals. Then you have a tiny, almost aristocratic class of the uber wealthy, the people who actually own these algorithms and the systems and the platforms, whose wealth will completely, dwarf anything we've seen as of yet today. And you've seen a number of individuals in the pandemic whose wealth has increased exponentially. I'll tell you why this scares me. That's a recipe for revolution.
Sure. Always has been.
So I think the only way we can address this is not through regulation or taxation. We have to essentially reboot education and training, not just for kids, but for adults, to prepare people for this, the skills they're going to need for this new world.
That's what I was just about to ask you. Let's work backwards. Education, how does it change? What are some of the steps we need to take to educate leaders, or at least inform the next generation of leaders to think in this way so something like this does not happen?
Well, if you think that our goal as a society or as an organization should be moving people out of category 1, working for algorithms, into category 2 at least, which is having the skills to really be effective in an algorithmic organization, then there's two problems we need to solve simultaneously. The people that are growing up today and the people inside the workforce now. So for the people growing up today, we need to really accelerate not just how we use AI in education, which has been a big focus, like how do we, create more scale and efficiency in schools. We have to figure out what are the core set of skills and capabilities that kids are going to need in this new world. Now, we know for sure it's not teaching them social media, right? Because they're better at it than us. It may not even be just teaching programming, because programming languages change all the time. In fact, it may actually be that rather than teaching people what to think, we have to get better at teaching people how to think. So how do you leverage computational thinking? How do you get better at pulling problems apart and then kind of thinking about the problem in a kind of a meta way, and then applying automation and technology to help you scale the solution? So this kind of new cognitive stack should be the new reading, writing, arithmetic, of education. Because whatever field your kid's going to go into, maybe they want to be an archaeologist, maybe they want to be an astronomer, maybe they want to be a doctor. There's something that's similar to all of those professions. They're going to be changed by machine intelligence. We're going to have computational astronomers, computational, I almost said computational astrologers, but we'll probably have those too. Computational accountants. So every field is going to be changed by AI and technology. But the other half, which is the workforce, this is going to be big. You're already today seeing the world's biggest organizations aggressively retraining their people. And it's because they know if they don't do that, they're not going to have even themselves the skills that they need to compete.
Now, Mike, how does one think outside the box? You mentioned reflection a few times. I know Steve Jobs and a few others, ideas have come from out of nowhere. Tesla is big into meditation, Buddhism, psychedelics has been a way to think outside the box, and it just is what it is. So how does one think outside of the box to change their mind or train their mind to think differently?
I think there's no one path to that. I mean, to me, one of the most valuable things about this current revolution we're living through is that if we can automate more of the routine transactional parts of our job, then we have more time for reflection and for kind of clearing our slate and trying to, see through the immediate crisis, whatever that might be. Bill Gates famously has his Think Week, where he'd go away into the woods with a stack of books, and I mean, it was the most important part of his year, where he would take memo. Even when he was actually working at Microsoft, he would take, a handful of memos that people had written for him, and he would really think deeply about the future of the industry and the future of this company. That's an extreme example, but carving out that time for yourself as a leader and for your team, where you can actually just go, okay, let's forget everything that's on our immediate horizon. What are we missing? What is now possible that wasn't possible before? How can we reframe the problem? How do we challenge our own orthodoxies, the things that we thought are impossible to change? What's happening in other industries? Because the strange thing is now there's much more convergence between industries. The things that are changing in the logistics industry are affecting what's happening in the entertainment industry. And it's because the underlying base is changing for all of us, which is greater use of AI, algorithms, and automation. And so there's opportunities for inspiration everywhere.
Mike, you got me watching Star Trek Next Generation. I'm not even kidding, on Netflix.
How on earth could you blame me for that?
I'm just going to blame you, okay? I just started reading your book, and I'm like, maybe I should watch something different. And so I just started watching this. And Data is, I don't know if you've seen it or not, I'm sure you have. Data is the character in Star Trek that isn't a human. Yet he is a cyborg. He is a person, or not, a robot person, essentially, in 1998, however you want to say that. He is a sentient being, but he lacks two things. He lacks humor, so he's always trying to make funny jokes, but he can't. And he lacks love. Do you think AI or computers, robots in the future will ever be sentient beings that will acquire personality traits such as love or humor?
He also lacks decent skin and a reasonable pair of contact lenses.
That's right.
The question of what is human is going to be something that's going to be harder and harder to answer. If you go back, right back to Turing, Alan Turing, one of the founders of the computer world that we live in today. He proposed this test, which is the Turing test, about whether or not you could, if you put two people talking together, whether if someone could not determine whether the other person speaking to them was actually a robot or a human, that was a kind of a sign of intelligence. It's easy to beat those tests today. And in fact, one of the most interesting new developments is something that OpenAI came up with called GPT-3. It's called it's a text transformer. Basically what it does is it's studied, all the world's documents and text samples. And it can use that to actually predict what text is going to come next. So you can go into this service, and you can build apps around it. You can put a short fragment of text in, and it can actually generate a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, or a whole essay based on your fragment. And when you read it, you'll honestly think it's been written by a human being. But here's the weird thing. If you use that technology to power a conversation, you could be talking to the computer, and you could think the computer's in love with you. You could think the computer's got emotions. But what the computer's actually doing is using statistical analysis to mirror your phrases and words in a way that actually almost makes sense. So you are reading those emotions into it. The computer has no idea of the real context, the real meaning of anything it says. It's just using statistics. So the big danger, I think, for us and this is something that Max Tegmark, the scientist, talks about, is that we create something, an AI that looks and talks and seems like it's conscious and real. But then we discover much too late that it's really just a automaton, something that's smart enough to trick us into thinking, it has humanity, but it's really just statistics and randomness. So I think it's a bit of a false target. I don't think our goal should be to be creating conscious, intelligent machines. I mean, everything that makes a machine useful is generally the things that are not human. Why do we need to invent an unpredictable, emotional, and volatile machine and then put it in charge of something mission critical? I mean, the whole point of machines is that they can do the things that we don't trust people to do consistently.
Well, let's talk about someone who has a conscious, who is conscient, or at least we think, Elon Musk. His power to tell stories is very interesting to people, intriguing to people. What is storytelling's role in an algorithmic day and age? And how important is it to incorporate storytelling into your business plan?
So I think Elon Musk has two superpowers. As you say, one is definitely storytelling, and this is hardwired into us. In that classic book *Sapiens*, the author speculates that one of the reasons why Homo sapiens beat up the Neanderthals was not because, as people think, Neanderthals were stupid or blockheaded. Actually, they were very intelligent and very resilient. But there was one thing that Homo sapiens, who were actually weaker and smaller and less physically capable, there was one thing they were better at. And that was gossip and storytelling. So they were kind of hardwired for sharing information about what was going on in their community, which ultimately became something which was very advantageous because, you could be big and strong and kill a tiger, but if you could invent some new way of trapping tigers using some sort of spear technology and you were able to share that with other people, that community would be more likely to survive. So I think we're hardwired for that. And visionaries like Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, they know how to excite the human imagination. So we give them a lot of rope, and we give them a lot of latitude. And we believe, and you think in the end, the stock market is just a sum of our beliefs and hopes for the future. So they're rewarded for that. But the real superpower for me, for someone like Elon Musk, is not just his showmanship. It's his ability to think and work from first principles. So if you tell Musk something's impossible, he'll go back and go, okay, let's reframe the problem. There's a great story I talk about in the book about how his first attempts at creating SpaceX were a disaster. I mean, he just sold PayPal. He was young. He had lots of money. He actually just thought about, as a stunt, sending something to Mars. So he basically looked into buying, some rockets. It turns out that, you can't just go buy a rocket from NASA. But then he found out that the Russians had some, intercontinental ballistic missiles that they're willing to sell. I don't even know how that happens. How can you go buy ICBMs from Russia? So he went over there and they laughed at him and said, listen, these things are like, I don't know, $20 million each and you need two of them. So he flew back on the plane. He was like, how can it be this hard? He thought, what actually is a rocket? Like if I was to take a rocket and break it down into its components and its kind of base materials, and I was to buy those things on the kind of commodities exchange, how much could this thing possibly cost? And by going back to first principles, not only was he able to solve that problem in a way that people thought was not possible, he was able to make a commercial viable business out of it as well. That's first principle thinking.
Yeah, I love that section in the book as well. What a story too. Yeah, what are the components actually, and what does it take to achieve that goal? Now, a couple things in there. Neanderthals go extinct, and then you said the Russian missiles, nuclear warheads, we could potentially go extinct. I want to talk about a real story that's happening right now. 1.4 to at minimum, maximum 500 species go extinct a day. It used to be 5 a year. Okay. Is there a false narrative? Is there something that we're chasing? We could get the XR we've talked about today. We could get all of this algorithmic thinking we want. But at the end of the day, we're on a path to the sixth mass extinction right now. Even if humans survive, we could deplete all the resources in the world.